Hare Krishna, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Reading the Mohinī Ekādaśī from the Kūrma Purāṇa. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Mohinī Ekādaśī. Yudhishthira Maharaj said, O Janardana, what is the name of the Ekādaśī that occurs during the light fortnight of the month of Vaisakha, April-May? What is the process for observing it properly? Kindly narrate all of these details to me. Lord Shri Krishna replied, O blessed son of Dharma, what Vasiṣṭha Muni once told to Lord Rāmacandra, I shall now describe to you. Please listen to me attentively. Lord Rāmacandra asked Vasiṣṭha Muni, O great sage, I would like to hear about the best of all fasting days, that day which destroys all kinds of sins and sorrows. I have suffered long enough in separation from my dear Sitā, and so I wish to hear from you about how my suffering can be ended. The sage Vasiṣṭha replied, O Lord Ram, O you whose intelligence is so keen, simply by remembering your name, one can cross the ocean of the material world. You have questioned me in order to benefit all of humanity and fulfill everyone's desires. I shall now describe that day of fasting which purifies the whole world. So the Lord often takes the position of a student in order to let his pure devotees speak the philosophy, in order to benefit the entire human race. So the Lord, of course, his separation that he feels from Mother Sitā is here described as suffering, but we should not misunderstand this to be the same as the suffering that we encounter in this material world. Suffering is there also in the spiritual world, but it is not actually suffering. It is also pleasurable. Since everything is of a spiritual quality, even jealousy, anger, and all these things bring pleasure to the soul. Let us continue. O Rama, that day is known as Vaisakha Shukla Ekādaśī, which falls on Dvadasi. It removes all sins and is famous as Mohinī Ekādaśī. Truly, O dear Rama, the merit of this Ekādaśī frees the fortunate soul who observes it from the network of illusion. Therefore, if you want to relieve your sufferings, observe this auspicious Ekādaśī perfectly, for it removes all obstacles from one's path and relieves the greatest miseries. Kindly listen as I describe its glories, because for one who even just hears about this auspicious Ekādaśī, the greatest sins are nullified. On the banks of river Sarasvati, there was once a beautiful city named Bhadravati, which was ruled by King Dutiman. O Rama, that steadfast, truthful, and highly intelligent king was born in the dynasty of the moon. In his kingdom was a merchant named Dhanapala, who possessed a great deal of wealth, of food grains and money. He was also very pious. Dhanapala arranged for lakes to be dug, sacrificial arenas to be erected, and beautiful gardens to be cultivated for the benefit of all the citizens of Bhadravati. He was an excellent devotee of Lord Vishnu and had 5 sons, Suman, Dutiman, Medhavi, Sukriti, and Drishtabuddhi. Unfortunately, his son Drishtabuddhi always engaged in greatly sinful activities, such as sleeping with prostitutes and associating with similar degraded persons. He enjoyed illicit sex, gambling, and many other varieties of acts aimed at gratifying the senses. He disrespected the demigods, the brahmanas, the forefathers, and other elders of the community, as well as his family guests. The evil-hearted Drishtabuddhi spent up his father's wealth indiscriminately, always feasting on untouchable foods and drinking alcohol to excess. So basically, he was a man of the lowest grade who is addicted to the 4 pillars of sinful life: meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex. So now in those days, such a personality was at once recognized, and he stood out of the general populace who were following the regulative principles of Varna Ashra system. In other words, such sinful men were very seldom seen. Now this description, we can find so many of them. And practically everyone is on this level of degraded lifestyle. One day, Dhanapala kicked Drishtabuddhi out of the house after he saw him walking along the road arm in arm with a known prostitute. From then on, all Drishtabuddhi's relatives were highly critical of him and distanced themselves from him also. After he had sold all of his ornaments and become destitute, the prostitute also abandoned him and insulted him because of his poverty. Drishtabuddhi was now full of anxiety and also hungry. He thought, "What should I do? Where should I go? How can I maintain myself?" He then began to steal. The king's constables arrested him, but when they learned who it was and that his father was the famous Dhanapala, they released him. He was caught and released in this way many times. But at last, sick of his arrogance and total disrespect for others and their property, the ill-mannered Drishtabuddhi was apprehended, handcuffed, and then beaten. After whipping him, the king's marshals warned him, "O evil-minded one, there is no place for you in this kingdom." However, Drishtabuddhi was freed from his tribulation by his father and immediately thereafter entered the dense forest. He wandered here and there, hungry and thirsty, and suffering greatly. Eventually, he began killing the jungle animals, the lions, deer, boars, and even wolves for food. Always ready in his hand was his bow. Always on his shoulder was his quiver full of arrows. He also killed many birds, such as chakoras, peacocks, kankas, doves, and pigeons. He unhesitatingly slaughtered many species of birds and animals to maintain his sinful way of life. The sinful results accumulating more and more each day. On account of his previous sins, he was now immersed in an ocean of great sin that was so relentless that it appeared that he could not get out. Drishtabuddhi was always miserable and anxious. But one day, during the month of Vaiṣakha, by the force of some of his past merit, he chanced upon the sacred ashram of Kūrma Muni. The great sage had just finished bathing in the river Ganges, and water was dripping from him still. Drishtabuddhi had the great good fortune to touch some of those droplets of water that were falling from the great sage's wet clothing. Instantly, Drishtabuddhi was freed of his ignorance, and his sinful reactions were reduced. Offering his humble obeisances to Kūrma Muni, Drishtabuddhi prayed to him with joined palms. "O great Brahmana, please describe to me some of the atonement I may perform without too much endeavor. I have committed so many sins in my life, and these have now made me very poor." So this is a very interesting paragraph. Drishtabuddhi came in touch with this great sage, Vasiṣṭha Muni, due to his past merit, some of his past pious merit. So pious merit are divided into three headings. There are some pious results that will help one enjoy material assets such as beauty, wealth, good parentage, and good intelligence. So these things, they come due to pious activities. And then there are some pious credit that help us attain liberation, moksha, merge into the effulgence of the Supreme Lord, Brahman, Brahmajyoti. And then there are some pious merit that will help us meet a saintly person or pure devotee. So this is the real pious, the real use of pious work is to come to that stage. So that is called also Agyata Sukriti, that when one does some pious activity that will help him to surrender to the Supreme Lord, unknowingly doing such activities is called Agyata Sukriti. For example, we have many temples. Someone might come, one day and just look at the deity and sweep the floor or something. He might not understand what's going on. He might not know. He might not think it's important. He just thinks, it's a temple. There's some deities there. But he's getting immeasurable pious activity that will help him to come in touch with a great devotee of the Lord. Just see here, he just touched the droplet that were leaking from the cloth of that great Vasiṣṭha Muni. And just due to this, his sinful activities were reduced. So when the weight of the sins are reduced, that means that the mode of passion and ignorance loosen their grip upon us, and thus we can be raised a bit more to the mode of goodness. And real knowledge comes from the mode of goodness, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. What is this real knowledge? I am not this body. That is the beginning of transcendental knowledge. And you can see simply by the purification of those droplets that Drishta Buddhi immediately became aware that, I have committed so many sins in my life, that's not good. It's going to affect me in my future life. So immediately the knowledge of not being the body was self-manifested. The great Rishi replied, O son, listen with great attention, for by hearing me your life will change, and you will become free of all your remaining sins. In the light fortnight of this very month, Vaisakha, April, May, there occurs the sacred Mohinī Ekādaśī, which has the power to nullify sins as vast and weighty as Mount Sumeru. The Sumeru mountain is spoken a lot in the Vedic literature. So it is a very, very great mountain. The breadth and heights of this mountain have been described in the Bhagavatam as well as other Puranas. If you follow my advice and faithfully observe a fast on this Ekadashi, which is so dear to Lord Hari, you will be freed from all the sinful reactions of many, many births. Hearing these words with great joy, Drishta Buddhi promised to observe a fast on Mohinī Ekādaśī according to the sage's instructions and directions. O best of kings, O Rama Bhagavan, by fasting completely on Mohinī Ekādaśī, the once sinful Drishta Buddhi, the prodigal son of the merchant Dhanapala, became sinless. Afterwards, he achieved a beautiful transcendental form and, free at last of all obstacles, rode upon the carrier of Lord Vishnu, Garuda, to the supreme abode of the Lord. Just see how powerful this Ekadashi was. It was the impetus of the beginning of his spiritual life. So from that day onward, it was simply purification until finally he could ride personally on Garuda. So just imagine the power of observing an Ekadashi with faith and proper sadhana. O Rama, the fast day of Mohinī Ekādaśī removes the darkest illusory attachments to material existence. There is thus no better fast day in all the three worlds than this. Lord Shri Krishna concluded, and so, O Yudhishthira, There is no place of pilgrimage, no sacrifice, and no charity that can bestow merit equal to even 1/16 of the merit a faithful devotee of mine obtains by observing the Mohinī Ekādaśī. And he who hears and studies the glories of Mohinī Ekādaśī achieves the merit of giving away 1,000 cows in charity. Thus ends the Vrajavasi narration of the glories of Vaisakha Shukla Ekādaśī or Mohinī Ekādaśī from the Kūrma Purāṇa. So again, very nice story. So we can see this is a Vedic style to answer a question by quoting another great personality who had answered the same question in bygone ages, previously. This is also found in the Krishna book, in one of the final chapter, prayers by the personified Vedas. So this question was asked, from Maharaj Parikshit to Shukadev Goswami, it was a question concerning how can we become freed from the three modes of material nature by following Vedic injunction, since Vedic injunction are themselves within the three modes. So Sukadev Goswami spoke of a time where Narayan instructed Narada Muni, and Narayan spoke of a time where he was speaking to sages among the demigods, where the Sanata, the four Kumaras were there. And then the story was further brought at the beginning of the creation, when the Lord awakens and the Vedas personified come and give prayers. Just like when a king wakes up, there are some servants who come and narrate the glories of the king so that the king can wake up hearing his own glory. So similarly, when the Lord Vishnu awakens in order to begin a new cycle of creation, the personified Vedas come and glorify him. So in this way here, the same thing. Yudhishthira Maharaj spoke to, asked the question to Lord Krishna. Krishna spoke of his previous appearance as Lord Rāmacandra, speaking to Vasiṣṭha Muni in this way. And then Vasiṣṭha Muni again speaks of the story where this hunter or this sinful man met the great sage, Vaisakha. So we need to see how important it is to follow a strict sadhana with faith. The final text here, the final paragraph, Lord Shri Krishna says, there is no place of pilgrimage, no sacrifice, no charity that can bestow equal to 1/16 of the merit a faithful devotee of mine observe the Mohinī Ekādaśī. So it's important to do devotional service with faith. Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana, Bhagavad Gita 2:41. So ekeha means our mind should be completely aligned with the spiritual master's mind, with Srila Prabhupada's mind, with the pure devotee and Krishna. So that means faith. So the spiritual master says something, there's no question of hesitating. It should be done immediately. So similarly, when we hear these narrations, we have to have complete faith in them, even though sometimes things that are written might appear to be poetically written more than scientifically written. Just like here it was said that it can destroy the sins as big as Mount Meru. So one might think, oh, this is very poetic. A mountain of sin burns up by following this Ekadashi. It is not poetic, it is a fact. But one must have faith. Without faith, there is no possibility of spiritual advancement, because everything rests on faith. There are different levels of a spiritual advancement in a spiritual life, and faith is the very basic principle onto which everything else is built upon, and that faith increases more and more as one progresses. And due to that faith in the words of the spiritual master and Krishna, one will ultimately reach the stage of a Uttama Adhikari, who is a devotee who is completely freed from any doubts. So this is it for Mohinī Ekādaśī. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you are liking these narration. I wish I can make the presentation better and better and speak in ways that will be beneficial to all of you. Of course, this knowledge comes from Srila Prabhupada, and it's all Srila Prabhupada's mercy. I'm simply trying to carry out his instructions of speaking of the glories of the Lord. And the Ekādaśī are very dear to the Lord. Otherwise, why would Lord Rāmacandra have done such an arrangement as to give so much credit to this Ekādaśī? By the strength of this Ekādaśī, he found Mother Sitā. Similarly, Lord Shri Krishna, when he was at the Gurukul, he pleased his spiritual master so much by going to get firewood with his friend Sudama, that his spiritual master said, the Vedic knowledge will always stay fresh, within your mind. So he gave of course he doesn't need anyone's blessing. Vedic knowledge will always be fresh, but he gave the credit to his spiritual master. So that's why Bhagavad Gita is always fresh, because of the boon of his spiritual master. So in this way, the Lord prefers giving credits to his pure devotee or his favorite days like the Ekādaśī and so on. So on Ekādaśī we shouldn't do anything material. If we have some material duty, I need to fix this in my house, I need to do that, I need to bring my computer to fix, or so many things. We shouldn't do any of these things. Everything should be simply spiritual. The best is if we're working, we should also take day off. 2 days off a month. Sometimes the Ekādaśī falls during the weekend, just like today. Today is Sunday. So simply chanting and reading, and that's all. Chanting and reading, chanting and reading. Also doing our seva to our deities. So thank you very much. So this is the end of the narration of Mohinī Ekādaśī. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.